Imagine a man walking into a grand five-star hotel, dressed in elegance and carrying himself with quiet confidence, believing he would be treated with the respect every paying guest deserves. But instead he was met with cold stares and silent whispers that made him feel like an outsider, as though his presence alone was a mistake. And when he politely asked for room service after settling into his suite, the manager himself appeared only to say with a sharp tone that people like him would not be served, a statement so cruel that it hung in the air like poison. Yet the man did not raise his voice. He did not argue or plead. He simply looked into the manager's eyes with calm silence, and in that silence was hidden a storm, because behind the composed smile was not just an ordinary guest, but a powerful figure holding a secret that would turn the tables within minutes and bring a shocking twist that no one in the hotel could ever forget. He walked through the shining glass doors of the luxurious hotel with quiet grace, his tailored suit perfectly fitted, his posture straight and confident, the kind of presence that silently commanded respect without a single word spoken. Yet no one in the lobby knew who he really was. They only saw a black man walking with dignity into a place where people judged more by skin than by character. And though he smiled politely at the receptionist and carried himself with calm courtesy, behind that smile rested a depth of power and authority hidden from their narrow eyes. Because he was not just another guest checking into an expensive suite, he was someone who owned far more than they could ever imagine. But in this moment he chose to remain silent, allowing the staff to reveal their true nature. Unaware that their careless arrogance and discrimination would soon invite a storm of justice, revenge, and a shocking twist they could never escape. After settling into his suite, he dialed the phone with the same calm politeness he had shown since his arrival, requesting room service in a measured tone, expecting nothing more than the basic courtesy due to any guest. But the silence on the other end of the line was longer than it should have been, a hesitation heavy enough to make the air itself uncomfortable, and when the response finally came, it was not the polite assurance of service but the cold, clipped voice of the hotel manager who had taken the call himself, stating without shame that people like him would not be served, the words landing with the weight of centuries of prejudice, burning in their cruelty and echoing in the walls of the room. And for a moment the guest simply sat still, his expression unchanging. Though the insult was sharp enough to provoke any man into anger, yet he chose restraint, his silence carrying a power more dangerous than any outburst could ever hold, because his eyes were calm, but his mind was already shaping a decision that would alter the fate of the very man who dared to deny him his dignity. And in that charged moment the true injustice revealed itself, not only in the refusal of food or service, but in the audacity to look at a paying guest, a well-dressed man who had shown nothing but respect, and strip him of his humanity with a single sentence. And though the manager felt triumphant, mistaking cruelty for authority, he could not see the quiet storm behind the guest's stillness. He could not sense that this was not an ordinary man who would bow his head and accept humiliation. For hidden behind that composed demeanor was a truth far greater than the walls of the hotel could contain, a truth that carried both revenge and justice, a truth that would be revealed at a time chosen not by anger, but by patience. And so the room remained filled with silence, heavy with tension, as the guest hung up the phone slowly, not slamming it down, not shouting into it, but gently placing it back in its place as though the insult had been too small to ruffle him. Yet within that gentleness was a plan, a decision already carved in stone. For what the manager had unknowingly done was write the first line of his own downfall, and every second that passed from this moment only carried him closer to the shocking power twist that would not only end his position, but also serve as a reminder that injustice never goes unanswered, no matter how confidently it is spoken. And though the guest remained seated, his calm eyes fixed on the quiet walls, his silence was louder than thunder. And in that silence rested the promise that revenge was coming, swift, final, and unforgettable. The guest rose from his chair with the same calm grace he had carried since entering the hotel, his steps measured and his expression unreadable as he made his way down to the lobby where the manager stood, arms folded with the smug arrogance of someone who believed he held all the power. Yet when their eyes met, there was no anger in the guest's face, no heated words or sharp retorts, only a quiet smile that unsettled the very air around them. A smile so controlled and deliberate that it felt more dangerous than any rage could ever be. And the staff who watched from a distance felt a strange unease, as though something invisible was building beneath the surface, something they could not name, but could feel in the tightening of their chests. For while the manager mistook the silence for weakness, the truth was far more chilling. Because the guest's composure was not born of fear, but of certainty. The certainty of a man who knew he held power the other could not even begin to imagine. And as the manager repeated his words with even greater boldness, reminding him once again that he would not be served in this establishment, the guest only tilted his head slightly, his calm eyes never leaving the man's face, and the smile remained, gentle yet heavy with meaning, leaving everyone who witnessed it with the same unanswered question: what is he planning? What could a man insulted so openly possibly be holding back? And why was there not even the faintest crack in his calm exterior, as though the insult had not wounded him at all, but instead revealed something he had been waiting for? And with each passing second, the tension grew thicker, the silence sharper, and the air colder. For it was no longer the manager who controlled the room, but the very man he had tried to belittle. Because there is a kind of power that does not need to shout or threaten, a power that speaks louder in silence than in words, and that power was written all over the guest's quiet smile, a smile that said everything without saying anything at all, a smile that carried the weight of revenge carefully measured and patiently held back, a smile that suggested the insult had not ended the conversation, but had only begun a story whose conclusion would be far from what the manager expected. And while the staff shifted nervously, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent, the guest simply kept watching, his calm demeanor creating a suspense that thickened with every breath, a suspense that whispered that justice was coming soon, that a twist was on its way, and though no one could see it yet, the man who stood quietly smiling was already deciding the fate of the arrogant figure before him, a fate that would arrive swiftly, shockingly, and without mercy. The quiet smile remained on his face as he stood there, calm and unshaken, while the manager puffed his chest with false confidence, believing he had put the guest in his place. Yet what no one in the lobby knew, not the receptionist nervously tapping her pen against the counter, nor the bellboy shifting uncomfortably in the corner, was that the man standing silently before them was not just another visitor passing through the city. He was the new owner of the entire hotel chain, a man whose signature could change the future of every single employee working under this roof. But he chose not to reveal it yet, because there was something more powerful in watching the truth unfold at its own pace, something more satisfying in allowing arrogance to expose itself fully before delivering the strike. And so he remained still, letting the manager continue his display of authority, letting him dig deeper into the pit he had created for himself, while every second of that silence tightened the invisible noose around the man's career, though the manager could not sense it, blinded by the false comfort of his title. And as he spoke with that same sharp tone, dismissing the guest as if he were unworthy of service, he failed to recognize that he was addressing the very man who signed his paycheck, the very man who had walked in not to seek permission but to test the heart of those who represented his empire. And though the guest's expression never changed, though his words never rose, there was an intensity in his eyes that told a story far louder than any argument. For those eyes carried the weight of someone who had fought against prejudice his entire life, who had built himself to a place where no insult could break him. And now he stood here holding not just dignity but power carefully hidden beneath silence, waiting for the perfect moment to be revealed. And the staff watching could not understand why he didn't respond, why he didn't walk away or demand justice immediately. But that was the beauty of his restraint. For patience is the sharpest weapon, and his patience was about to carve a lesson that none of them would forget, because within that silence was a storm. Within that calm smile was revenge taking shape, and within that measured pause was the promise of a power twist so shocking that the arrogance filling the air would be shattered in an instant, leaving only regret in its place. And as the guest folded his hands behind his back, looking at the manager as though studying him like a page in a book, the truth remained hidden for just a little longer, but it was there, burning beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to strike with finality. The silence stretched for several minutes, heavy and unbearable. And then, with the same calm voice he had carried from the beginning, the guest finally spoke, asking in a polite yet firm tone to meet the highest authority in the hotel, a request that immediately stirred whispers among the staff, for they expected him to be taken to some distant office or introduced to an unseen superior. But instead, the very manager who had insulted him only moments earlier stepped forward with an arrogant smirk, puffing his chest as though he owned the place, declaring that he was the one in charge, that no decision was made without his approval. And for a moment, he basked in the illusion of power, believing he had silenced the guest, believing he had proven his authority. But then the unexpected happened. The guest's calm smile widened ever so slightly, and with a measured grace he reached into his pocket, pulling out a folder stamped with the crest of the hotel group, opening it slowly as the staff leaned closer in suspense. And then in a voice that carried both quiet authority and undeniable truth, he revealed his identity, not as a mere guest, not as someone seeking favor, but as the new owner of the entire chain, the man whose name was signed on the papers of ownership, the man whose presence was not a request for service but a test of respect. And in that instant the color drained from the manager's face, his arrogance collapsing into fear as the realization struck him harder than any blow could have, while the staff around gasped in shock, unable to believe that the very man they had seen insulted was in fact the one who controlled their futures. And before the silence could settle, the guest delivered his words with surgical precision, calm and final, telling the manager that his services were no longer needed. That effective immediately, he was fired, the statement hanging in the air with such weight that the entire lobby seemed to stop breathing. And the revenge was not loud or dramatic. It was silent justice. It was dignity delivered with calm authority. And as the manager stumbled backward, desperate to explain, desperate to take back the words he had spoken, the guest did not allow even a single excuse. Because true justice does not negotiate, it acts. And in that moment the power had shifted completely. The very man who had tried to deny service was stripped of his own, and the lesson was carved in stone for all who watched, a reminder that arrogance built on prejudice will always collapse when faced with truth. And though the guest never raised his voice, never showed anger, the quiet force of his revelation was stronger than any roar, a moment of revenge that carried both shock and satisfaction, leaving everyone in the room stunned by the twist they had just witnessed. The words struck the air like thunder, and for a moment the entire lobby froze as if time itself had stopped, the staff standing with wide eyes and open mouths, unable to comprehend what they had just heard, their disbelief echoing louder than any sound. And the arrogant manager who only moments ago had carried himself like a king now stood trembling, his face pale, his lips parting in broken silence as the weight of reality crashed down upon him. His authority dissolved in an instant, stripped away not by argument but by truth, a truth that left no room for denial. No space for defense and no chance for escape, because the calm guest before him was not merely a customer, but the very man who owned the walls around them, the man whose quiet presence carried more power than all his bluster combined. And the staff gasped again as the papers in the guest's hand glinted under the lobby lights. Proof undeniable and absolute, proof that justice had arrived without delay. And as the manager stuttered, trying to form words of apology, his voice shook with the desperation of a drowning man. But no sound could undo what had been spoken. No plea could erase the insult that had already been sealed into memory. And the guest simply stood still, his calm smile never fading, his silence heavier than any speech, making it clear that the decision was final. No arguments, no second chances. Only the swift and exact justice that arrogance had called upon itself. And in that moment the staff saw more than just a dismissal. They saw a lesson unfolding before their eyes. A lesson that prejudice carries consequences. That discrimination, when spoken out loud, can destroy even the most secure positions. And as the manager's legs wavered, as the color drained completely from his face, the once confident figure now looked small and powerless, stripped of the authority he had flaunted only moments earlier, while the guest remained a portrait of quiet strength, proving that true power does not need to shout, that true revenge does not come with fire, but with calm precision. And the shockwave spread through the lobby like a silent storm, leaving everyone shaken, humbled, and deeply aware that they had witnessed something unforgettable. A moment where social injustice was not only confronted but corrected instantly, leaving no space for doubt. And as the manager turned, his eyes darting to the staff who now avoided his gaze, he realized the humiliation was complete, that his downfall had been both public and permanent, and justice had been served with such clarity that not a single witness could question it, because the truth had spoken louder than arrogance, and the silence of the guest had carried more weight than all the manager's words combined. The manager stood frozen, his pride shattered and his career erased in the very place where he had believed himself untouchable, while the guest-turned owner walked away with the same quiet grace with which he had entered, his silence echoing louder than any words of anger could have, leaving behind a room filled with shock and awe. And the staff who had witnessed every moment knew they would carry this memory forever. For they had seen arrogance destroyed by truth, prejudice crushed by dignity, and injustice answered with swift and undeniable justice. And in that unforgettable moment, a lesson carved itself deep into the minds of all present, that no man should ever be judged by the color of his skin, that respect must be given before titles or uniforms, and that true power does not announce itself with noise but reveals itself with calm certainty, striking only when the time is right, and when it does, the world remembers.